I think before I even started in triathlon, I started off back in public school, sort of being exposed to cross-country running and track and fields. And I remember watching the grade 5s get ready for cross-country, and they were being called out for the team, and they said, oh, well, you can't run because you're only in grade 3 or grade 4, and so we only take these kids. And I thought, I don't know why, I just really want to run. And so I started running around the school field all the time, thinking maybe if they saw me running around the field, they'd say I could be on the team, but it didn't happen. And so I had to wait my time until we were allowed to run, and I was finally allowed to run cross country. And I was one of those kids that was either like middle of the pack or end of the pack, and you're finishing when you have that side stitch, probably because you did no training, but you always get that side stitch, and just always thinking, wow, I did so awesome. I finished that mile or kilometer or whatever we ran, and always thinking that I could do better. And so I just kept at it, and one day I had one of those races where that side stitch went away, and all of a sudden you win the race. And so ever since I was little, I just remember that I always wanted to run. I was not involved in any organized sports other than running at school. And as I moved into, well, every fall we'd have Terry Fox run, which was a huge run for us. So I loved doing the road races, and we saw Terry Fox come through our town, so that was pretty inspirational to see him run. And I just like being active, and that was something that I did, and eventually it turned into doing triathlons. And when I started triathlons, I just thought, what's the hardest thing that I could do? I want to do the hardest thing and just see how I can do at it. And every time I did a race, I always thought there was an opportunity to do better, because, well, over a race that's 9 hours long, or say 10 or 11 hours when I first started, over that time span, there are so many things that you can do. You're like, oh, I could not do this, I could not do that, I could keep running, I could not stop for aid stations, I could run through them. And you just think of this huge amount of time you could save, and there was always an opportunity to do better. So I kept going on, and I thought, if I'm doing what I love doing, then I'm just going to keep doing it as long as I can. And so I had a very long career over about 15 or 20 years.
Wonderful. Our next guest tonight, I'd like to introduce you to Evan Dunfee, and I think this is it's a great honour to have Evan join us. Now he's from Vancouver, he lives in Richmond, and he's come over to attend this special event. And Evan had the honour of competing for Canada at the Rio Olympic Games in race walking. Now, race walking, I don't know if you know of the event, it actually has two distances, 20 kilometres and 50 kilometres. Now, just put that in context, the men's marathon, women's marathon running race is 42 kilometres. So the race walkers have the longest endurance event available to us at the Olympic Games. And and because the games are always held in incredibly hot places, Rio, a very mentally challenging, demanding kind of event. And so I think this is just fabulous that we can have someone who has competed at the very highest levels. And this weekend, this Sunday's Victoria Marathon, and there's some people who are going to run 3 hours 40, and that's going to be a really amazing performance for them. And this guy could actually beat them walking it. That's amazing. That's extraordinary. So, to sort of briefly summarise the film clip. So, Evan, maybe you'd like to talk us through this.
Yeah, sure. I'll start. I'll sort of address the initial question of how I got into the sport, and then tie that into what happened in Rio. So, growing up, I loved track and field. I got started when I was 9 years old. My elementary school had a little popsicle stick run. You run around the field, you get a popsicle stick, you do that for 45 minutes, you hand in your popsicle sticks, the teacher marks them down, and you work towards your goals of whatever it is, 50K for the semester, 100K. And for whatever reason, when this started at my school, I was in a very vulnerable position where I needed something like this. I needed that structure. I love sport, but I was the tiny kid. I was the runt of the class. I was 4 foot nothing, red curly hair, big round glasses, short shorts, long socks. I was that kid, and I needed an outlet, and played all the sports. Wasn't very good at anything because I had no motor control at that age, and I was just way too small. But I worked the hardest. I was always willing to kill myself out there with whatever I was doing, and this running thing opened up, and I thought I'll give this a try. And for the first time, I found an event where my input directly affected my output. So I was comparing myself not to the kids around me, but to how far I ran the day before, how far I ran the week before, and I could always find that I could go a little bit further each day. And at that age, I needed that sense of accomplishment to really, it drove my self-esteem, it drove my confidence at a time in my life when I didn't have much of that. So I became very attached to running, fell in love with running, joined the local track club. 11 years old, by complete serendipity, I got involved in race walk. My brother had been doing it, and he was the older brother, 3 years older than me, and he had won a couple races, and I, as the younger brother, rightly thought, well, if he can do it, it can't be very hard, and got him to show me how to do it in the driveway. Went up to my first race. Kid on the start line asked me what I wanted to do. It was an 800-meter race back then. I said I wanted to break 5 minutes. He laughed at me and said I would never do that on my first try. I beat that kid and walked 4:58. And got a gold medal and thought, all right, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And to just go one step back, in grade 3, we had to write a little assignment in school about what we wanted to be when we grew up. And I wrote I wanted to go to the Olympics. And my teacher looked at me and said, that's very nice, but why don't you write something real? And I said, no, I'm good. This is it. This is what I'm going to do. And that was it. So it was always in the back of my mind that it was something I wanted to do. And as I matured and grew as an athlete and as a person, I grew into my body, learned a little bit of motor control skills, found out that I had a big aerobic engine to work with, and went and got my degree in kinesiology and fell in love with the idea of finding out what your potential is, and so I write my own training program. I have a coach who's an amazing coach, and he's evolved past having to write my training program for me. We're now more mentor-mentee relationship where we talk about things that have nothing to do with track, because he trusts me so much with coaching myself in terms of daily workouts and programming and stuff, and that gives me a great sense of accomplishment as well to do that. So that was sort of my journey here to the Olympics, and then this summer in Rio. So last year I won the Pan Am Games in Toronto, a race that I was not supposed to win. I was up against World Championship medalists, World Junior Champions, Olympic medalists, and I think I was ranked 6th coming into the race. And 20K race, I hate the 20K, the 50K is my bread and butter, and the race went off painfully slow, 9:45 first 2K, as opposed to we're typically around 8 minutes, so less than warm-up pace. And I thought, this is not going to be good for me. If it comes down to a sprint, I'm toast. So I took off from the front at 2 kilometers into the race, forged a big lead, and every lap, because we raced on a circuit, and every lap I'd come around and think, why haven't those guys started catching me yet? And every lap, I'm getting a little bit further away from these guys. And it wasn't until about 16K until I realized, they're not going to catch me. This is going to pay off. And spent the last couple of K reflecting on my journey up until that point and how amazing it was to have friends and family watching me in Toronto win that race. And so I learned from that race, going into that race, I learned to focus on the process and to really, commit to a goal, and when you decide what you want to do, to stick to it. And I decided that was going to be my plan for Rio. 2016 was going to be all about setting down a goal, a standard, and chasing that blindly no matter what it took. And so I followed the best people around, best in the world around, to Australia, Japan, Europe, the Flagstaff, just followed these guys who'd won Olympic medal before, and I thought, who better to surround myself with than the guys who've done it before? Nobody expects me to be a medal contender. I was ranked 10th, I think, in the 50K, and came into the 50K in Rio just with the expectation of I'm going to absolutely kill myself to stay at the front. If I blow up at 30K and don't finish the race, as long as I worked as hard as possible to be at the front of the race until that point, I'm going to be happy. I just want to see how far I can get at the front. I'd finished 10th in the 20K, best ever international performance. I had my performance. I didn't need another top 10 finish. The 50K was about proving something to myself. And so the race started, I went off the front, 25K into the race. I was the most inexperienced person. I went to the front and tried to win it halfway through the race, which if you ever watch a marathon, that rarely ever pays off. The guy that goes off the front halfway through very rarely wins it, but I was naive and I thought, it could be me. And it wasn't. They caught me at 40K, went past me. I spent about 4K sulking, thinking, well, this sucks. And at 45K, I told myself, no, remember, you came here to work as hard as possible to stay up with those leaders, even if it meant dropping down to the finish line, dropping to the ground at 48K without without finishing the race. So put your head down and go catch these guys. I was about 15 seconds down at 45K. Put my head down, took off, caught up to the third place finisher at about 49K into the race, 3 hours and 40 minutes, or 3 hours and 37 minutes into the race. And I was absolutely gassed. I thought, I got one chance at this. I sprinted past him, tried to get away from him, tried to break him. He responded. We were both absolutely exhausted. He tried to pass me up the inside. We sort of bumped into one another and jostled, and up until that point, my focus had very much been on every step. My legs were on fire, and I just kept telling myself, just get through that next step, get through that next step. And when as you saw in the video clip, we sort of jostled. I took about 10 steps, and then my legs gave out underneath me. And in that moment, my awareness had gone from thinking about my legs and telling them, okay, just get through this next step, get through this next step. My body then went, hey, what just happened? We just bumped into each other. What was that? And as soon as that awareness came sort of to consciousness, my legs went, I can shut off now, and they completely stopped working. And that last K, I sort of had to muster up the energy just to get across the finish line, and came across the finish line in fourth. Got temporarily upgraded to third, back to fourth. This whole time this is happening, I'm in the medical tent receiving medical treatment, just complete exhaustion, heat exhaustion, getting bottles of water pouring over top of me, getting Gatorade in me, getting some color back in my face. And got back to the village about 5 hours later and was able to sit down, look at the video, and they told me, okay, you're in fourth place right now. The Japanese have appealed. You have the ability to appeal this decision one more time. And I looked at the video and I saw that this was a guy that, Hiroki, the Japanese guy who bumped me, is a guy that was not intentful. It wasn't on purpose. He was just as tired as I was, and it was a complete misunderstanding. We met each other in doping control right after the race, and he had been disqualified and came up to me and apologized. So I knew that he had not done this on purpose, and I made a decision not to appeal it. And yeah, it's sort of been dubbed this big Canadian, epitomizes sort of the Canadian spirit and all this stuff. And it's just funny to hear that sort of stuff, because it's a decision that I never even second guessed.
Do you know the three core values of the Olympic Games are friendship, excellence, and respect? And I think all three of those are epitomized in what Evan has just said there. Performing at the very highest level, competing brilliantly, showing immense respect for his rivals, and absolute, complete 100% commitment, but also with friendship as well. And I applaud you for your integrity, because you could react in many other ways, but I think that's outstanding. So I think he deserves a round of applause. Okay, so our next third guest is Bruce, and I just want to start off by applauding and thanking Bruce for the immense work that he's done behind the scenes to pull this together. So we've had weeks of planning for this, and Bruce has just led everything from creating, inviting the speakers, to booking facilities, to creating the t-shirts, directing the parent volunteers to help make this work with one purpose really, and that is, well, many purposes, but a key one is to give you young folks a fabulous opportunity to engage with one another, to listen, to learn, and to be inspired, we hope, and to really give back to our sport. And I know that that is something that Bruce cherishes deeply. He's been involved in the sport for such a long time, and in a moment we'll hear from Bruce about that journey. But just as a brief profile of his successes, two-time Olympian, 11th place at the World Marathon Championships in Gothenburg. Now you've got to think that 11th place. In the marathon, there are hundreds of Kenyans who are running incredibly fast times, and they take the best three. And the same with the Ethiopians, and the same with the African nations. And for a guy from Canada to mix it up there with the very best marathon runners in the world shows that Bruce was not just the best in the country, but he was one of the best in the world for marathon. Marathon's an incredibly difficult event. It's not one that's won in the first 1 or 2 minutes of the race. It requires a lot of patience, a lot of skill, a lot of courage, and I'm hoping we'll be able to find a quick a video link in a moment, but I'd just like to ask Bruce, and then I'm going to excuse myself to search for a link here. I'd like to ask you the question I've asked Evan and Laurie here, is maybe you can just tell the boys and girls about your path that led you to, through school and into university, what inspired you to be a runner, and the lessons that you have sort of observed about yourself that you would like to share. How might you address that?
Yeah, sure. Well, what you were saying kind of resonated a bit. So I was I made small look tall. I was the smallest kid in the school, actually second smallest. My best friend was the smallest in my grade, and I was horrible at sports. I was the kind of guy, when we played baseball, I ran to the outfield because I knew no one could hit the ball that far, and so if no one could hit the ball that far, I couldn't drop the ball. Of course, there's nothing to do out in the outfield when no one can hit the ball that far. So I'd be the kid making sandcastles with the gravel out there, and I wanted to do well at sports. I was horrible, right? And I was just tiny. And at that time, I lived in Ottawa, and just down the road in Montreal, they had the '76 Olympics, and so sport was just so big, right? And I went away to a summer camp, and at the camp, there was this. Actually, I should back up. I really wanted to do well at sports. I just couldn't find a sport. So I can remember praying, God, if you can find me a sport, I'll work really, really hard at it, right? Anything I could beat the big kids at, which of course at that point in time, everybody was the big kid because I was just so small. So I went away to camp, and at the camp there was this, one of the counselors had just run a marathon, and so he was really keen on this running thing, and he started this club. It was called the 30 Mile Club, and we were there for 3 weeks at camp, and if you ran 30 miles over the time you were at camp, you got this white t-shirt with fuzzy green letters that said 30 Mile Club, and oh, how I wanted that shirt. So I thought, okay, look, I gotta get that shirt, and I gotta know what this marathon thing is, because when adults said, or other counselors or stuff said, Rob runs the marathon, it was not like Rob runs the marathon, it was Rob runs the marathon. You know how adults, when they say something, you're supposed to respect it even though you don't really understand what it is? So I knew I was supposed to be impressed with this marathon thing, but I didn't know what it was. So I figured the best way to find out was to corner Rob. Maybe if I got him on a run, then he could not be distracted by other things. He could tell me all this marathon thing, what it was, right? So I go to him, he's working on the waterfront, down on the docks or something, sailing and swimming and all this kind of good campy thing. And I said, so Rob, how about we go for a run together? And he kind of probably looked at me and said, who are you, kid? But he said, well, I'm training for a marathon. I thought, oh, there's that word again. He says, the shortest run I'm doing is an 8K, or 5 miles, because it was miles back there, 5-mile run. And I said, well, I can run 5 miles. Which, honestly, guys, that was as close to a lie as you're going to get. Because, the furthest I'd ever run was, across the field with somebody chasing me, playing tag at recess, right? And now I was on the hook to run 5 miles. It was talk about being in over your head. And I figured, okay, now I got to prove it. So I said, well, Rob, I'll show you I can do 5 miles. So there was a half-mile loop around the camp, and I figured, well, that means I got to run 10 times around this. So here goes. So I went off, in my cut-off jeans and t-shirt and this hot summer August day in Ontario, and trucked around this loop. And I figured, well, I didn't know anything about running, right? I figured if I stop, it probably doesn't count, so I better keep running, right? And by the 9th or 10th lap of this thing, I'm thinking, I bet you there's a lot of big kids that can't run this far. Maybe this is my sport. And it was that's how I got into the sport. And I went back to school, and I trained really hard, just like you. I figured, just keep going around that schoolyard first thing in the morning, right? Something will happen. So I get up, and, first I did the 10 miles around, and the school bell rang, and I went off to school. And then I get there earlier in the morning, I did 10 miles around, and I thought, okay, well, this is real great. First cross-country race came along, and I was all excited because, and I just got smoked. It was just so bad. I don't know. I think that person was. I don't think I was last, but it was just a case of over time, just keeping plugging and keep loving the sport, and that's eventually kind of, kept going. And so I was 12 years old. I was 11 at the time. And by the time I turned 12, I figured, look, I want to be like Rob. I want to do this marathon thing. So I decided I was going to go in this marathon. And some friend of a friend told me how to train for a marathon. And so it was like I did 3 miles one day and 5 miles the next day, and then I did a long run. And I just keep repeating that with a day off in between. And so I went and I did this marathon at 12 years old. And I finished up, and my parents took me out. I think I ran like 3:30 or something. We went out and we had breakfast, and or brunch or whatever. And I said to my mom and dad, I'm going to run the marathon at the Olympics. And they all kind of looked at me like, oh, isn't that special? And I think that I kept going. And I guess nobody really kind of like Forrest Gump, no one told me to stop. So I just kind of outlasted a lot of the kids that were beating me through high school, and yeah.
Okay, you can stop now, because I'm going to show you a video.
No, there you go.
Okay, so here we go. Okay, now we do them some advice. So if you're in kind of grade 5, 6, 7 at the moment, and you're thinking, wow, and what's this sport all about? What advice do you have for me? And maybe guys who are in those sorts of grades, does anyone have any questions, or any of you have any questions that you'd like to ask them about this sort of these early years of the sport? Okay, so Pamela, what advice would you give them? Laurie, what would you give? What advice?
Well, I think it's pretty standard. Everybody, each of us would say find something that you like, and for most of you it's probably track and field or cross country, and just keep doing it. Don't let other people sort of tarnish your views of whether you should be doing a certain sport or a certain distance. If you like it, to keep doing it, and that's just following your passion for something. And if you do something long enough, it's like they always say for any sport, it's either, 10,000 touches for a ball and racket, that kind of thing, or a hockey stick, and just the more you do something, you get good at it. And so it might take you 10 years to be as good as you think you can be or want to be at something, and it doesn't happen overnight. So if you stick with something, and I feel like I was the same as Bruce, I just kept doing what I loved doing, and so I got better and better, and people stop and they pick other focuses and do other things, and so if you stick with something that you like long enough, you're bound to get good at it just from having done it for so long.
Thanks, Laurie.
Yeah, I think like the one off the trail piece of advice that I would give is something that I look back when I was that age and I wish I'd done more. Just write stuff down. Like keep track of these different dreams that you have, and I have a whole childhood of vague memories of loving this running thing and enjoying it and going out and trying to be really good at it. But I didn't write anything down. I don't remember any of these like key moments that might have changed who I was as a person. And now looking back on that now, I really regret that. So just don't be afraid to write stuff down, talk about these dreams that you have, and you're going to be, I think you also find that you're much more likely to stick to it and to keep pursuing these dreams if you're writing it down and keeping track of what they are.
So I would say be a fan. So when I was growing up, it was an exciting time in athletics. I mean, Gary showed this picture of, remember the one with the rabbit, right? And the rabbit turned. Okay, so I was growing up in that era, right? And the guy that got, well, I don't even know if he got second. There was, you see, at that era, there was two types of people in the world. You ever heard this? There's two types of people in the world. There's two types of people in the world in the early 1980s in athletics. There was the Co fans, and there was the Ovett fans. Okay? So Sebastian Coe, who's now the IAAF president, he was like the clean-cut guy. He'd gone to some of these preppy schools in England, and he was really well studied boy, and he was the guy that had a fierce kick, and he would kick away from people in the home stretch and celebrate, and all the media said he was too cocky and all this kind of stuff. So you're either a Seb Coe fan or you're a Steve Ovett fan. And I was a Steve Ovett fan, right? Stick to the man kind of guy, right? So, so one of the things that I really liked about that age is I became a fan. Like I knew these guys, right? And you were rushing home to see how they'd done in some European race, and you're getting all excited about it. And I mean, why do I put a ton of time into pulling this together, because when I was like your age, somebody in Toronto, I was growing up in Ottawa, somebody in Toronto brought Steve Ovette's coach to Toronto for a clinic. And we all piled into this van and we drove the 4 hours from Ottawa to Toronto. And I never wrote notes better than that in my entire life, right? And I can still remember doing this workout. It was so much fun because I was a fan of the sport. So the piece of advice that I would give you is be a fan of your sport. Learn as much as you can on it. Study it, know the big names, get caught up in their racing. Just have fun with it. It's a great sport and it's exciting. And it's a fun sport to be a fan of.
Yeah, I want to support that because in England we have a magazine called Athletics Weekly, and it covered all track and field. And every Friday in our local newsagents, it was delivered Friday at 5 p.m. I'd be waiting there at 10 to 5. Come on, hurry up! You know, waiting for the delivery van. Magazines would be kicked out. Here's my Athletics Weekly. Take it home, and it was 100 pages per week of results, interviews, tactics, technical stuff, all sports, and just absolutely loved it. And you know, today you guys have got the internet that you can read results and do research and watch films, and you've got so many more ways to learn about the sport and be inspired by it. So I really completely concur with what Bruce has said. So I want to just switch gears a little bit now, because all of us have got goals. You've got goals. You're here because my guess is that you're planning for something right now. Maybe it's you want to do well in the local school cross country race, or your training is focused on the upcoming provincial championships. Maybe some of you are thinking it's grade 12. I want to kind of string together some really great performances to prepare me for university. I want to get that scholarship. So we've all got goals, and I think part of your preparation is the actual physical training. You go out, you do the work that either you believe is going to help you or that your coach has set you. You're doing the training. But that's just one element of your training. And I'd like to ask the panel about some of those other elements that help sustain you during the difficulties that can occur when we're training. Because it would be great if every single training session we had was a flyer. We were just feeling fantastic and really just on top of our game. But that's not realistic. There's times when we struggle. So I'd like to ask the panel, whether it was in racing or in competition, what sustained you, or what helped you to continue to work towards that goal, and then ultimately, because we know these guys have been successful, help them to achieve these goals. So what was it that sustained you? What were the techniques or tactics, or did you train harder or less? That sort of approach. So Laurie, would you like to start us off with that?
Well, that can kind of be a big question, or lots of answers, I guess, because if you divide it up amongst your training and, say, racing, you always have to remember that you're thinking about yourself. So when you have all the people that you compete against out there, you can't always be thinking about what your teammates are doing or your competitors are doing, or if you're doing a workout together, you can't be comparing necessarily your workout to theirs. If, say, they're running a couple seconds faster than you every time, if you could take that and just be kind of depressed about it and go home and think that was a horrible workout, or you can just think of your own workout and think of all the positive things. And so people always talk about that, but I think throughout my whole career it was always just thinking of how can you turn whatever the situation is into something positive. So if it's a workout, it would be just saying, okay, this is just a workout that I need to get myself to the next workout, or this was positive because I felt really good. I was kind of tired, but I was still able to keep up. Or I know on the track it's hard because it's a lot of time-based, so you're seeing all your interval times. And for me, once I was finished with track and I was doing triathlons, I rarely went to the track anymore, but I would say, okay, I'm going to do some 800-meter repeats today, but I would just make up a time that would reflect roughly 800 meters, and I would just do it on the grass somewhere so that every workout was positive, because I was doing so much other training that I would often be tired. I didn't want to look at times and say, oh my gosh, why am I so slow? And I remembered all my high school and university times, and that would probably just send me through the roof, so I'd just go do the workout. And every workout would be positive because I did it. I knew how I felt. I accomplished the goal of doing the workout at 80 or 90% effort, but I never had a negative aspect to it. because I wasn't looking at times. And the same thing if I was on a bike ride. For a while I'd ride with a computer, and it started to kill me because you'd be just looking at the computer the whole time saying, oh my God, I have to go faster, faster, and you just keep trying to keep this time. So finally I just got rid of it because I thought I have to go by how I feel. So almost all my workouts were by how I felt. So I'd go by 80 or 90%, and so that way every workout I did was a positive workout. It was never a negative one. So it ended up being a lot of training by myself because other people would come to train with you and they'd be coming in fresh and you'd have done a week's full of workouts. So it ended up being worse trying to have company with people training and they'd be so fresh and you'd be tired. So I ended up I just changed my training techniques and trained a lot by myself or with somebody who was doing equal amount of work. So just being positive all the time.
Yeah, and like very similarly, like when I made my breakthrough from sort of just scraping by, making world championships, just hitting the standard type of thing, to becoming that, competing for medals and competing for top 8s and stuff. I was doing so much of my work at threshold, and every workout had to be a challenge. If I wasn't tired, that workout was pointless. And so I was doing all this garbage mileage that just didn't. It wasn't hard enough to really kill me, but it was too hard to get any positive benefits out of it. And it was really hard for me to then try to back off those easy workouts, and for me they were easy walks, to a point where they were going to be beneficial, and I could string together 200K a week of that stuff. And so for me the big breakthrough was because I'm very competitive and every workout has to have a goal. And so when I finally was able to convince myself that a goal for the workout was to go slow, and that the going slow was the success of the workout, and then making that the game. The game was, okay, can I hit this? This is my target pace on slowness. Can I go even slower? And just seeing if it became really fun of that, because almost all of my training is on my own, and that includes going out for 45K training sessions. So you're out there for over 3.5 hours. No music, no nothing, just you in the road. Don't get to go through the trails. It's all on pavement, all on the roads. So you need those little games to keep you going and stuff for me. And then so that I found was one really thing that helped, is finding the little bits in each workout that are going to cause success. And like with my tempos and interval workouts and stuff, there'd be days where I was like, okay, today I'm really tired, so I'm going to do a workout I've never done before, so I have nothing to compare it to. So I can't look back and say, oh, well, I did this same workout last week, X amount faster. I would do, okay, let's change it up a little bit, make it a little bit different, so I can't say, that workout was the best I'd ever done that workout, and that could be positive. So I found just like changing things up that little bit and finding out those, as you were saying, making every workout successful really helped lead to having more fun with training and really enjoying it more. And a big turning point for me in 2016 was my training diary was I would spend hours on that thing, just way too precise, and I had some crappier things happen in my life earlier this year, and for whatever reason I found that training was the one thing that brought me back to a happy place, and I completely stopped writing my training log. It became didn't matter anymore. It was just go out there and enjoy training, because that was when I was happiest. And I think that was one of the things that contributed so much to my success this year, is that every time I was stepping outside to do a workout, it was such a positive environment I was entering into. And however you can craft that to being a positive environment, I think is going to lead to a lot of success.
Yeah, I think I would, that whole positive environment, and I think is really critical, especially to like coming to a place where you actually get a breakthrough. No, what I mean by breakthrough is not just kind of like you're chipping away at your time, but actually like a real sudden and significant improvement over a season. For me, that positive environment came through training with training groups. Like my big breakthrough, I moved from Ontario to the Lower Mainland to go to Teachers College, and I started training with the K-Jacks. And so at the time, this was like a team with all the national team, a lot of the national team members, for everything from 800 right through to the marathon. And it was that environment that really made it so positive, right? So yeah, you'd have some bad races or bad workouts or whatever, but you were always back out with the group. And then you just kind of got to the place where you started to feel good. Like, hey, I'm not that far away from this guy, and I'm training with this guy. If I can train with him, why can't I race with him? And if I can race with him, then maybe I can beat him every once in a while. So it was just that whole idea of gradually getting more and more confident in your abilities through the people that you were able to train with. So to me, that made a huge, big difference in terms of kind of creating that positive environment.
I think we've had some very powerful messages here. I want to pose a question to you. When you do your workouts, do you set yourself a goal for the workout? You may have your goals for the race, but as Evan said, he sets himself goals for not just the overall workout, but maybe even specific sections of the workout. And that it's not always, well, I just have to try harder and harder. As he mentioned, sometimes a successful workout was not trying so hard, actually taking it easy. On an easy walk, it had to be easy. So that was a success when you did it. That to me is really intriguing, because I think sometimes we have this tendency to think we just got to try harder and harder and harder and harder, and actually sometimes what that does is just makes us more and more tired and more prone to injury, and then it starts to to backfire on us. So I think we've heard some really interesting messages. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your preparations for a race. Sometimes we can go into a race where we're really confident, and then perhaps sometimes there are occasions when we're unsure. Maybe you've had an injury, maybe you've been a bit sick, maybe you're up against a rival who you just think that person's unbeatable. How do you approach that? What kind of advice would you have for these athletes when you're going into a race where you're thinking, I'm going to have to find a way to be confident or find a way to overcome some of the uncertainties that I might have? So what advice might you have for these young athletes? Bruce, maybe perhaps we go in a different order here. Maybe you'd like to start us off.
Yeah, I mean, well, I used to have a big problem. I could do well at the provincials, and I would do well at the provincials. And then when I got to the national level, I would choke. And when I actually think back about what it was like, I put myself through a whole lot of hell in the last couple of weeks before a race, because I would start to really get fearful about, going into a race. And, I'd really obsess about it. It was just like I'd start to get worried about, well, I hope I don't have a bad race. And bad races were kind of inexplicable to me. Like sometimes I have a good race and sometimes I have a bad race. It was almost like roll the dice before the race and it came up bad race. And so I had very little control over whether or not I was going to have a good race or a bad race. So like I would just be like, oh God, please don't let me have a bad race. Nationals are coming. And so I'd be really quite fearful about this. And it wasn't really until I started to train with other people that were like at national, international levels, that I started to see how they approached big races. And that completely revolutionized the way that I approached a big race. So what I noticed was that like the guys I was training with, was one guy who was like Commonwealth Games gold medalist at steeplechase. And I noticed is Graham Fell, you might know him, and I was training with this guy, and I noticed that he didn't kind of blow up in the big races. In fact, often he did really well at the big races, and so I started to look at how he would approach it, and I noticed that he wasn't worried about not having a good race because, he had good training, and so if he had good training, why wouldn't he have a good race? And then I started to look at other people like, Paul Williams and other guys that were Simon Hugorf, and they always had good races, and they approached it like professionals. And so I started to change the way that I approached this, and my dad was a dentist, and so he was a professional, and I was pretty sure that he didn't go into to work in the morning saying, oh, please don't let me drill through somebody's cheek today, because he trained well, and he took his dental school, and he practiced well, and he was confident in his skills, and he was a professional. And so I started to look at my racing in a much more of a professional way. I'm going to arrive, I know what I have to do for warming up, I'm going to know what I have to do for my goals, I'm going to focus on performing. If I do as well as I did in training, I'm going to race well. And it completely changed the way that I approached big races, and that really helped me to reframe it from being something that was fearful to being something that I've got a job to do, I'm a professional, and this sort of thing. And when I was choking, it's just little things too, like just the way that I would approach things. Like when I often choke, it would be like I'd come into the race and I'd be unshaven, and it would be, like this was just kind of like I was the rough guy, right? And I thought, no, I'm a professional, so that means that in the morning I get up, and if I was going into work, I would shave. So I'm going to shave before my race, and I'm going to make sure that I'm well showered and ready because I'm going into work now. This is my work day. I'm going to line up. This is my job. I'm a professional runner. And I just changed the way that I approached things, and it made a huge difference.
Thanks, Bruce.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna contrast that a little bit, and I'm the big thing I want to say is I think it took me a long time to find out how I best prepared for races, and I think the best thing to do is just try different things. Put on different masks before these races that aren't as important, and see what works for you, and experiment with different ways of preparing for them. Because I used to get very similar to fear or just extreme nerves before big races, because at that point in my life, my happiness, who I was as a person, that was all contingent on racing well. If I didn't race well, then I was a failure as a person, and I was sad, and I was miserable, and all these things that are so far from the truth. And so as a youth athlete, I can remember my World Youths was just, I didn't sleep for like 3 days before the race. I was an absolute wreck. I was in tears the night before my race of just bone-chilling nerves, and I raced horribly. And I remember after the race thinking, there's got to be a different way to this. This is not fun. This is not enjoyable for me. What can I do differently? And I spent a number of years trying to find something that worked for me, and what ended up working for me and was the opposite of being professional. It was, I trained so well. I am probably the best trainer in the world for race walk. I can beat Olympic champions daily in training. And I thought, okay, well, I can train amazingly. Let's start treating races just like they're training. And so for me, the big thing that worked was not changing anything. Not even thinking that the race was just a really hard workout where I'd get to test myself. I would go in, and at Pan Am's, that was my big mantra. It was, this is just like training, this is just like training. And that took away all those nerves, and I don't get nervous before a race anymore. I get excited, I get it's an opportunity to do a really hard workout. So for me, that's the opposite of being professional about it, of just treating it like any other thing that I do, was what really helped me. So a bit of a contrast, but as I said, you gotta experiment and find what works best for you.
Great, thanks, Evan. You, Lori?
I'm slightly opposite from Evan, and I just thought, doing my training, I never really wanted to train quite as hard as I could race. And the reason I felt like that was because when I went out for training sessions with other people, I found like they were going out to race you every time they went out, and they would just kill you in these workouts, and then on race day all of a sudden they'd be so far behind you. And I always thought, well, what happened to these people that could train so hard? And the thing was, it's really hard to push your body 100% all the time in training and then expect that you can go to a race and push your body 100% again. So if you're sort of just under that level all the time, then race day is suddenly it's this really special day where you've tapered, and you're going to ask your body to do something that is so hard, yet you can do it because you haven't had to deplete that mental part of yourself like some people do so many times in training. So you still have that little bit of freshness there to push yourself. And something that I know you'll totally agree with this is, when you're in the race, there's a lot of positive self-talk. So you could be in a race and you're hurting, and everybody else is hurting too, and you can dwell on that, be like, oh, my knee hurts, or oh, I'm really tired, or I have a stitch. Or you can think, I feel good, I feel good, I feel good. And it's a total lie most of the time. And if your race is, say, 2 hours or 3 hours or 5 hours or 9 hours, that's a long time to be saying something like that. But that's your brain saying that to your body. So if you keep saying, I feel good, well, your body's going to come around and your legs will keep moving, and other people will be walking or stopping, and you keep going. So it's just a matter of trying to get your brain to tell your body what to do. So it's really hard when you're not doing well to be positive, but you always have to be positive and be aware of where your competitors are, but not be focused on your competitors. It's still you in the race that you have to worry about. So it's always focusing on what you are doing and being able to react to something if you're behind or not feeling well, and being able to adapt. And if the race isn't going according to your game plan, to be able to adapt again, and to always be able to adapt to any circumstance, even if it's something you didn't anticipate, and not get all freaked out and discouraged, and to be able to keep going.
Okay, let's add one. It reminded me of a great point that that sometimes bad races happen, and you just need to be. I find it's the best if you can just laugh them off and say, "Well, that was awful," and learn from it and move on. And not dwelling on them, just laughing them off and keeping even in the race, because races are so long that you can know it's gone terribly wrong very early into a race and have a long way to go, and you can feel sorry for yourself, and you can get discouraged, or you can just sort of say, well, let's see how this goes, and try to present it always in the best positive light, and knowing that it's not going to be the best, but as you said, adjusting that game plan along the way, and being adaptive in your plans.
I mean, I don't think you're going to be a good runner if you don't sooner or later become very good at dealing with a bad race, because it's going to happen, and if it wrecks you for months, then there goes your career. You have to be. I mean, what do you guys find? I always find the worst time of a bad race was the next morning. I'd wake up like at 5 or 6 in the morning. I wouldn't be able to get back to sleep. And it was that was the quiet time when nobody else was around, and you'd have to kind of reframe the whole thing and deal with like, well, that really sucked. And try to, well, now what? And that sort of stuff.
The flight home for me.
Yeah.
When you're literally trapped inside a metal cage, and metaphorically you become sort of trapped inside your brain of those thoughts start to swirl, and that for me was that moment of, okay, I need to stunt this downward spiral and reel it in a little bit.
I think sometimes you have a bad race and you think that everybody's looking at you saying, oh my God, did you see that race? Did you see how bad they were? But meanwhile, everybody else is focusing on themselves, and they quickly forget a day later how you even did. So it's more focusing on the next race and not dwelling on the one that you just had.
I mean, I'm very lucky that very few people are usually watching our races, so that makes it a bit easier.
All right, so I've just got one more topic, and then I really want to to throw the floor open to you guys. But question that I'd like to raise is, in all of our lives seem to become a lot more complicated with the demands of school, or whether it's demands of work if we're growing up. There's a lot of busyness in our lives, and especially if you're a runner and you want to be striving towards your goals, you really want to do well, but you know that you've got your friends, you've got your homework, you've got a lot going on, you've got training, you've got a lot of demands on you, and just like to ask for any advice you might like to share about, first of all, balance, so that helping to bring the best out of ourselves, but also the importance of nutrition and sleep, and just how important they are in the life of an athlete that wants to achieve the goals that they've set for themselves. Because I think we probably all agree that those are some of the more challenging things that are out there for teenage lives and for grown-up lives, to come to think of that. So I just wonder what advice you may have on those sort of attention to detail kind of topics, sleep, nutrition, balance. What would you recommend, Laurie? Would you like to start us off with that?
Well, first of all, if you hang out with other people, all your friends, if they're sort of doing the same thing, it makes it easier to opt out of certain things that might sort of hinder your career. So if, say, somebody's having a party and you don't want to go because you have a track session the next day, but you're hanging out with all your track friends, it's easy to just say, no, I have to get up and do track the next day. So it gives you an easy out for that. And I think just being committed to your workouts, and know that some days you might have say a test at school or whatever, and so you have to stay up late and study for it, and that's fine, but the rest of the time, when you can get to your workouts, don't skip out on them. Just make sure you're the person that's there. If the workout's at 4, you're always there at 10 to 4, quarter to 4. You're not the person that's there at quarter after 4. Just make the most of it and show up on time, and yeah, I don't know.
How about with sleep? Because I mean, if you're doing a 9-hour competition, you were probably on the bike for hours. You must have been.
Well, I was always up early at 5 a.m. to go swimming and to be at the pool by 5:30 or 6. But even when I was just running, I found it hard if I didn't do, the days I didn't have track and that I had to run on my own, if I didn't do it right away before school, I wouldn't do it, just wouldn't happen. So I knew if I got up before school and I went for a run in the dark, it would be done and I'd be good for the day. But sometimes if I had to think about it, it wouldn't necessarily happen. And so I would often be a total geek. I'd go to sleep and I'd either have my running clothes next to the chair by my bed, or I'd go to sleep with running clothes on. I'd get up and I'd just get up and I'd go out the door and I'd go running. And it would just happen because you're not going to not go running if you wake up and you have your running clothes on or they're sitting there right beside you.
I'm
So
seeing
I
a business opportunity for Nike here, Nike pajama.
Things like that through like high school and university, just to get out the door, because I knew if I was tired at the end of the day and I'd taken the bus and the subway home, I probably wouldn't go. So I just do my workout before I had a chance to think about it.
How about you, Evan?
Like the majority of my friends going up through high school and university weren't athletes. They were sort of the more, they had more time with their lives. They liked to party a bit more, and it started off being very challenging of having to balance that. But I found once I went off to university and had that, I was close enough with these friends that I could sit them down and say, hey, look, these are my goals. These are what I want to do, and looking for their respect from that side of thing, but having them understand what I was doing and having them, your non-athlete friends, if you will, don't always understand the goals that we have or why we do what we do, and you can't just sort of say, oh, they don't understand it. This is, they're bad friends because they don't understand this. You need to sit them down and say, this is what I'm trying to do. This is why I'm trying to do it. I love you to death, and I need you on my side on this. And I had a handful of friends that said, yes, what do I need to do? How can I aid you in that pursuit and be there for you when you need me there, but also be respectful of when your commitments interfere with what we want to do as a group and all this stuff. And I think that was a really important conversation to have, because without it, you're just always in tension, trying to ride that line of seeing, like, not offending them by missing this party and all that stuff. And yeah, just sitting down with them, having that talk was such a big thing. And yeah, I lost a few close friends from that because they couldn't understand why I was doing what I was doing. But those, looking back on it now, I say, well, they weren't real friends anyways. If they couldn't understand what I was after, then it was doomed from then. In terms of training through university, I found training was a great escape from school. So I would use it. I would study and work until I couldn't think anymore, and then I would get to go out and do a workout, like an easy walk, easy jog, because that was my escape. That was when I could big deep breath, reset, recharge, come back in the door and get back to work. And so I just tried to fit in, be as efficient as possible. So not trying to work in, okay, when will training be most beneficial to my day of breaking things up and fitting in there. Not always prioritizing training. There was times in my life when training couldn't be number one. School had to be number one, and you have to be mindful of that. I think when you go off to university, you have to remember that you're student athletes and you're not athlete students. So there are times when you have to prioritize school, but that doesn't mean that training can't fit in there in some regard. You just have to find where it's easiest. Sleep was never a problem for me. I'm asleep 5 minutes into my head hitting the pillow, so I always had have a great 8, 9, 10 hours of sleep, and that was because I would always get my schoolwork done early enough that I would have that opportunity to sleep, because it was always more important to me than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that Lori touched on was that she had a routine. Like, the alarm clock went off, her feet hit the running within a few minutes because she knew that if she didn't get it done, then it wouldn't get done. And I think that the advice that I would give is that you set a routine that will work, and you look at, like, it's kind of like if you've heard the analogy, right? You take a bucket, right? And you, like, how much stuff can you put in the bucket? Well, if you put like a big rock in the bucket, you think, well, wow, the bucket's full, right? And then you may think, well, I can't get any more rocks in this. But then you start to pile in some pebbles, right? You put pebbles in around the side, and it's like, wow, I'm surprised that I could get in more pebbles. And then you think, well, okay, well, I can put some sand in there. So you pack some sand in around the little pebbles, and now you've got a big rock and some smaller rocks and the sand. And then you think, well, I could probably put water in there too. So you pour in water. And I think what we do is we start to think of chunks of time as big chunks of time and not little chunks of time. So you think, oh, I can't get a run in because I'm really super busy, right? Well, okay, but yeah, you probably have half an hour when you're sitting on your device anyway, so you have half an hour, you could probably go for a run. But you have to organize where that's going to fit. You think, well, like my coach is all over me about stretching, so I should be doing some stretching, right? But I don't have any time for stretching. Well, actually, you do, right? Because, like I'm doing my hair, or I'm brushing my teeth or whatever. Well, I can be stretching when I'm doing that, right? It's like, how do I fit what I need to do in among, well, some of you aren't doing hair. How do I fit my training in around all the things I have to do in around all this stuff? Like, well, I'm watching TV. Hey, but I'm watching TV, I could be rolling, or I could be stretching, or I could be, icing that sore leg or something. It's all the little, like, how do I make the most of the time? I think that one of the things that we had that, an advantage that we had over you guys is we didn't have devices. And honestly, your smartphone is probably your worst enemy when it comes to achieving some of the goals that you have for your life. And it can be a great friend, but it can also be a huge big enemy because it's a huge time waster. Because the time that you spend looking on Facebook to find out silly cat pictures, or some guy doing something stupid that is very similar to the guy that was doing something very stupid and similar last week, it's time that you don't have time to do the things that really matter or that you say really matter. The other thing is, when you're watching your device and it's close to bedtime, you are affecting your sleep and you won't get as good a quality. And so, quite honestly, one of the things that we had going for us, certainly Lori and I, maybe not you because you're in this generation, but when we were athletes, we didn't have these devices that were in our hands all the time, and it was actually an advantage. And so, the challenge that I would make to people that say, I don't have time to train, I don't have time to do weights, I don't have time to do this, I would say, okay, let's try a little trial here. Time the amount of time this week that you're on social media. Get a little stopwatch, time it. Okay, now next week, take 10% of that time that you spent on social media and put it towards training. And the next week, take another 10%. And the next week, take another 10%. You've got 30% of your time for training. So now you can get in rates, you can get up your mileage because now you have a little more time. You can get better sleep, so now you're not all run down. You can do better on your homework. And all you've done is carve out a little bit of your Facebook and Snapchat time.
And that other 70% that you're still using it, make sure to follow me, Evan Dunfee. Thank you.
Read the blog, follow the Twitter, be a fan. Come to the dark side, try race walk.
Okay, so guys, we've got maybe about 10 minutes or so. I want to just throw this open to you. Any questions that you have that you would like to just share with the panel, and please, Tyler.
I've got a question. One thing that I say to my athletes a lot, and I'd be interested to see what you guys think, and you guys in the room all basically play into this, is when you're on the start line and you look across at all the athletes and everyone's ready and the gun's about to go, I always say to them, everyone here is trained like a lot. Like they've all trained sort of at quite a high level. If they're at BC high schools or at the Olympics, or everyone's on that line. They're probably close to the same level, whether it's Olympics, high schools, or whatever it is. And I say, it's funny though, because a lot of times when you're on these races, the same kid always wins. And why is that? And I think it's, some of those kids just really believe they're gonna win. Like they go out there and it's all what you're talking about with your planning and all that sort of information that you gotta believe you're gonna do it, you gotta be out there, you gotta be prepared, and you gotta be able to bring it on the day. And, you know, how much do you, is that right? Like, how much do you think about that when you're there? Like, I mean, obviously everybody's fit, but you've gotta want it too. You've gotta really want it, I think, as much or more than the person beside you who's trained probably fairly equal. Like you see, a lot of these you can train someone's a minute behind you or a few seconds behind. Why is the difference? Why in the race do you end up crossing the line ahead of them? What do you guys think of, what do you say about that?
Well, I think there's, like you said, a lot of confidence in being confident in your own abilities and being confident that you've done all the training you needed to do in the lead up to your event. And I know when I first started going to Hawaii to race, I'd look at the start list of all these ladies and I'd be like, oh, she could beat me, she can beat me, she can beat me, she can beat me. I was like, oh my God, there's 50 people that can beat me. And then as soon as I switched it to be like, just having confidence in myself, knowing that they'd be looking at me, thinking I would beat them, and I'd be like, oh, well, you know, I wouldn't look at the list and look at each single person. I'd be like, you know, somebody's going to get a flat tire, somebody's going to feel sick, somebody's going to start walking, somebody's going to do this. And so rather than just look at the picture of all the people that might be out there to beat you, it'd be just thinking that I'm going to have a great race. And this is what's going to happen to all the other people. And so as soon as you start thinking you're the one with the advantage, the race will go a lot better because you're already at a disadvantage if you start your race looking at all the competition, knowing that they might be able to beat you, because really most of the races, everybody has the exact same fitness level when they're at the start line. So it's just a mental part before the race and then during the race that really determines who the winner is. So whoever has that strongest mental ability, which is different in every single distance of race. It's a different kind of mental ability, and the longer the race, the longer the time you have to be focused inside your head.
Yeah, I mean, I think you really hit on it. Like, it's a lot of the difference is just mental skills, right? So, you know, like you said something earlier about kind of like talking positive during the race and stuff, and I really think that those are skills that you develop, and you develop them in training, and often the person with the better mental skills is the person that actually wins the race, right? So, you know, like especially like we're in this situation where like we're all like long distance runners, right? And I can speak for myself, and I'm sure that you guys can tell. I've talked myself back into races like countless times. Like, oh man, I've just gone through this really rough patch, and I've had to talk myself back in, and I talk myself back in with little tricks, right? I'm just concentrating on my next footstep, or I got to get to that street light, or, you know, or just keywords, right? Like I'm really strong, or I get my best race was probably when I came 11th at the Worlds. I came in seated 70th, and I left the stadium. They start the race in the stadium, and I left the stadium. I think I was second last, and I just kept pulling through the race. And I'd done a lot of training in England, and I'm a big Winston Churchill fan. And one of his lines is, you know, he's trying to encourage the British people. They're getting bombed to shreds by the Battle of Britain, and his line was, you know, this is your finest hour. And so I just kept telling myself in this race, this is your finest hour. And, you know, I'd pass another guy, this is your finest hour. And I just kept talking myself into it, and it was all these keywords that I'd rehearsed in training like that really started to help reframe the race and help me manage through the discomfort and just stay relaxed when it's really hurting. And it's those kind of skills, I think, that make the difference between, you know, the people that are all kind of evenly matched in terms of training ability, and actually the people that are just star racers, or just pull a rabbit out of the hat on the day.
You can't tell me that that film clip of Mo Farah, that he wasn't confident of his abilities. So you freeze frame that last lap, and there's 10 guys there who can all win that race. They're only 1 or 2 strides apart, all great kickers, all world class, all incredibly fit. What is it that separates him from the rest? And yes, tactics is a big part of that, but that incredible self-belief that I'm going to be the one who's going to be controlling the very front, the pole position. I'm going to be there. And he is, and he does, and he wins. And it's remarkable that he, every time, the script is the same, and he does it every time. And they let him. And I don't know how, but he does. He just gets there. It's amazing. Yeah. Mr. Cooper.
Okay, so I know like track season, I'm racing it's under 5 minutes, like usually like for a race. Like in and around cross country, like 20 minutes, that area, depending on the distance. And I can race, and everyone else, like we're middle, kind of short, long distance racers. And we can race like once a week, but you guys are like you can't get any longer than like your distances for a race walk or a marathon or a triathlon. So I'm wondering what it's like only having like however many races each year and having to like train knowing that like you have this big build up period to a race and then you race and you get maybe like 3-4 races a year and then you have like 2 weeks after where you're not really doing much. And I'm just kind of curious about how
Sustaining motivation.
how you guys can like
I love it personally. Like I love having that's it. Everything's working towards that one race. It's simple. It's not confusing of which race am I peaking at, which races am I supposed to. Everything else I do. Some years will be a double peak. So some years I'll have a 20K in May and a 50K or a 20K and 50K. Because in Rio I did both the 20 and 50K. But I love when I sit down at the beginning of the year and plan out my schedule and figure out how I'm going to get this one race. I have this one chance to get things right, and getting to put the pieces to that puzzle of how I'm going to get to that point. I find that really exciting, and the 50K. I mean, for me, the 50K is so exciting. I love it as an event because there's so many things that can go wrong. Not only do you have to be fit, but you have to be able to take in up to 1 liter an hour of water or of fluid if it's a hot day. You have to be able to take in 70 to 90 grams of carbs an hour, or you'll bonk. And so all these little things that I can tell myself, that I can train myself. Nobody else is training these as well as I am. Guys might be more fit than me, but I'm spending more time on the little things pre-cooling. So having my ice vest and my ice bath ready to go before the race. Like all these little things that I can maximize on that one day to get the most out of it. I revel in that moment of being able to plan around that one day, one shot type of mentality.
It's very interesting you mentioned like the big thing with in Rio, the most dominant team was the UK cyclists, like especially the track cyclists. They just destroyed the rest of the world. Won an incredible amount of gold and silver and bronze medals, right? It was just crazy. And the way that they did it was what they call aggregate marginal gains. And so they really started to focus, just like what you said, on all the little details. So for instance, the whole notion was, how can I improve my sleep by 1%? How can I improve my diet by 1%? How can I improve my bike by 1%? How can I improve my uniform by 1%? And they would do stuff like, okay, look, if I want to improve my sleep by 1%, how can I improve my pillow by 1%, right? So they do research on the best pillows. And then they would make sure that they tried out the best pillows and they brought their best pillows to their race. And how can I improve my, it was all, they geeked out, to put it mildly, right? Like complete geek out. But I think that, when you're looking at the bigger races and you have like a big race like that, it allows you to geek out on the details. And it gives you that comfort that, I've got a stone I've turned over that nobody else has turned over, or I've turned over my stones better than anybody else has.
And I think like one thing I can touch on from World Championships, sorry to jump in there, but seeing so many distance runners after big races that didn't go so well, and sitting down at a table and going, okay, what's your plan? It's usually the end of the year, and what's your plan? And they go, well, I didn't have a good race, so I'm going to race again in 2 weeks. And that boggles my mind, because you didn't have a good race. Why didn't you have a good race? Why is racing again right away such the better thing to do? And I think I'm really lucky that I get this one shot, and if it doesn't go well, I'm not forcing myself into another shot a week later, 2 weeks later, that might put me into overtraining. I think a lot of times athletes can get carried away with that idea of, okay, this one didn't go well, but I know I'm fit, I need to try again, and can just race themselves into injury sometimes.
One of the most interesting organizations that has produced research to support the thing that Bruce was talking about, that attention to detail, is NASA. And they were wondering about ways of improving the performance of their astronauts. You're spending billions of dollars putting them into space, and you've got to make sure that they stay healthy, they stay incredibly focused, so they don't make mistakes that will end up costing them their lives. And they found that a 20-minute nap in the middle of their working day, and admittedly their working day was extraterrestrial, not a typical day as we would think of it, but 20 minutes of sleep or even just rest produced a 13% improvement in production and performance. Now that's quite significant if you think of that if you were to be able to build into your day just a short rest where you completely turned off the devices, you put your feet up, you closed your eyes, probably wouldn't go into a deep sleep, but you took a nap, that it was to produce an improvement in your performance. Intriguing thought. You know, guys, any more questions from the floor here? Yes, Thomas.
I was just wondering, like, especially like, kind of building on what Coop said, like, but you guys, you have these trainings, and Evan, you plan out your trainings in a very like specific way, and you try to do your best in the training so that this will develop into like the best possible scenario in competition, and that's what you're hoping for. And what if you go into something you've trained, you know what you're capable of, just like there's indicators in your workouts and stuff like that. And going into it, you're expecting something. You're looking for like a certain goal, and you think like I can do this. And like, what if that doesn't pan out? What do you guys really do in order to like kind of think about how to do things differently the next time, because like that was supposed to work out.
Well, I think like Evan said before, even if you have a bad race, every race is useful for something because you learn so much about yourself, your mental thought, how your training went, everything just by every race that you do. So if you have a really bad race, your reaction to it and how you handle it or how you finish that race lets you know what you might be able to do the next time that you race. So it would always be a problem when you see some people that don't finish a lot of races, then they're never going to get that benefit. So no matter what, I figured you have to finish every single race because that's going to build your character and tell you something useful that you can either take to your next training sessions or to your next race.
Yeah, like so perfect example is my 20K in Rio. A week before the 20K, I had done a 10K time trial in training, 39:30, something like that. I knew I was capable of walking in under an hour 20. I felt great. I'd come down from altitude. I felt amazing. I knew what I was ready for. And in the race, 12K into the race, we were going a fairly just over 4-minute Ks, so just over that 120 sort of pace. And I started slowing down. And I remember in the race thinking, I'm fitter than this. Like, what is happening right now? Like, I couldn't understand. I couldn't explain it at that moment. And it took me about 4K in that race. And I'm lucky that my races are long enough that I have that much time where 15, 16 minutes later where I went, snapped back into it and said, well, no, okay, this is happening. Accept that this is happening. What are you going to do about it now? How are you going to maximize it at this point in time? What are you going to change now? How are you going to make this a positive race? In the last 5K in Rio, I think I passed 7 people in the last 5K. And it was I was going backwards, and I just flipped the script in my mind and said, no, you can still save something from this. Like, yes, you're off pace for that 120 that you thought you were capable of doing, that, being in that main group, but I had enough time, and I think in your middle distance races, you need to make those decisions so much quicker, and everything happens way faster. But I think it's still a useful skill that you can teach and you can develop, and as Laurie said, like, you can teach that through having those bad races and learning how to change your mindset. You can't do that. If every race is a great race, you can't learn how to turn it on when it's going poorly. So yeah, using those bad races as an opportunity to change it up and find success in it.
I read something that was really interesting. It was an interview with a guy who was one of the Special Forces guys. These are the guys that were in Afghanistan, the U.S. Special Forces, and they were doing these very intricate and incredibly dangerous Special Forces raids and missions and stuff. And they were talking about, well, how do you approach excellence and as a Special Forces soldier? And they said, the guy said, well, one of the things that we do that's quite different than a lot of people is we spend an inordinate amount of time debriefing. So like we might go on a mission and we would do the mission and it would go really well. We got in, we got out, we did our thing.
we, killed the bad guys we had to kill or whatever we had to do, right? And he said we would spend hours and hours debriefing because it went well this time, but it might not go well next time. And maybe we made mistakes and we got lucky this time, but if we made the same mistakes next time, we could end up dead, right? Our whole mission could be destroyed. We could lose our whole team. And so the thing that I really pulled from that is that we probably don't do a good enough job of debriefing when things go well or when things go wrong. Like, if things go well, we really give no time to debriefing it. It's like, yeah, all right, that was the greatest race, wow. But why was it the greatest race? And we don't give it really much thought. We just pat ourselves on the back. We got a PB, we beat so-and-so, we got the medal, isn't that great? But we don't actually think, well, what did I do right and what did I do wrong that I got away with? And when we have a bad race, of course, then we beat ourselves up. We don't do a proper debrief. We just do kind of like a self-flagellation, right? Like, I'm a bad person, and, I raced like a boob, and, I'm bad, and, that sucked. And we don't actually think, well, okay, what did go well, and what I could have done better, or where did, and this is where it really gets into the intricate part. Where did I lose the race? And that's where it's often, okay, when did the first thought of doubt enter my mind? And we don't really want to go there often because as athletes, we have to admit to ourselves that there was a time in the race where I started to doubt. I started to doubt I could beat that person. They started to pull away. I started to panic. I got to the line. I looked at them. I thought I can't beat them today. It's all those little things. Like, when does that doubt come in? And it's through looking at when does that doubt come in, and why did it come in, and what would I do next time if I had that same doubt? It's those sort of intricate debriefs that actually take us to the place where, okay, you've had a bad performance, and this is how you can make sure it's better next time.
Are there any more questions? You've been sitting here very patiently. You've been an excellent audience, but I know it's 9:10, and we talk about the importance of sleep, so we can't then make ourselves hypocrites and then say, well, we're going to still be here till midnight. You're doing great. So I just want to wrap things up. First of all, a few, we'll do housekeeping in a moment, but I just want to thank Laurie and Evan. We've and Bruce, we're incredibly fortunate to have all three of these guest speakers bring in their international experience. But as we asked or talked about right at the very beginning, their journey started just like you guys. They were in elementary school, inspired, doing well in school races or trying out the sport of track and field, figuring it out, and then finding their way through provincial teams onto national teams, competing at the highest levels. And the importance of attention to detail, being good to yourself, but also working hard at the things that will help you to become a better athlete. And so I think we are very fortunate to have had these athletes here to share their wisdom and experience. And I know that there will be other opportunities this weekend that you will be able to talk to other athletes. And I hope that you will take away, even if it's just 1, 2, 3 things that you can just say, this is what I learned and this is what I'm going to apply to my own practice, either as a person or as an athlete. Then if you can do that, then we can say this has been a great success. Now we have some gifts that we just want to present, and actually I'm going to ask 2 of our athletes from Prairie and Harriers to help me to do this, more just to present. And that are these as gifts as well? Yeah. So we've got, and I think these are actually quite fantastic. Just put these down. So this is for Laurie, and not for Laurie, is Laurie. So maybe Robbie, would you like to come up and present this to Laurie? So thank you very, very much, Laurie.
Thanks.
Isn't that extraordinary? So Jack, and I'd like to present this to Evan on behalf of us all to thank you, and Laurie, for your wonderful time. And
Thank you.
it would be And congratulations on your outstanding achievement this year. It would be a little disingenuous for Bruce, who actually organised this, to then get one of himself.
I'm just a pinch hitter.
But we do want to thank Bruce and Evan and Laurie for giving us their expertise and their wisdom for tonight, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and please join me in thanking them. Housekeeping, please.